So there's been some details released of the new arena game mode that the team has been working on. And if you didn't know already, there's currently Ascend mode, which is a 1v1 auto battler, which we've all been playing. The team has been working on a kind of free-for-all round robin with 8 players, and essentially you can think of it like TFT. And I'll give you some examples of what that looks like if you didn't know what TFT is, and we'll go over the details that Aaron's released. And this does have some implications for the NFTs that you catch within Overworld. So it looks like the plan is going to be to have the 2 game mode, Ascend mode, which I've already talked about, and then the new game mode is going to be Gauntlet, and that is the TFT-like game mode. So just to give you an example of what it's going to look like, this is TFT here, so you can see the 8 players on the right-hand side of the board. The health pools are going to be the same as in Ascend mode, the 1v1. You'll just all be versing a different opponent each round, and you're all sharing a pool of alluvials that you'll build your teams with within the game. So instead of building a deck beforehand, this is how you're going to build out your team. You'll have some kind of an economy. You can see here that's kind of rolling down. You can choose to roll using your economy or your gold, or you can just rely on the refreshes you get each round, and you might be a little bit weaker early, but later you'll have more economy to roll down for higher level, essentially alluvials, towards the end of the game, because you'll have access to maybe better alluvials as you level up. So you can see there's experience with leveling. Aaron does mention there might be something with leveling your alluvials, so there might be some key differences here, but essentially this is what the game's going to be. So if we look here, Aaron said we're building the first no ownership required game mode for the alluvium ecosystem. You'll still need a passport to sign up, but you'll be able to play right away. And it's going to be a multiplayer shared deck game, which is like TFT. I'll show you how that looks. However, he's saying that there's going to be obviously some differences, and one of those is going to be the hyper system. So he's saying the idea here is it's easier to build your favorite team comp, not by much, but also it should be easy to counter other people's comps. He's referring to the hyper again. Someone asked, there was talks about your alluvials or the NFTs you own changing the odds of the alluvials coming up basically in the shed deck where you roll down. But Aaron here is saying you can't alter the chance of these things with NFTs. It's purely going to be cosmetic. However, he's pointing out that obviously there's still the pay-to-win version, the Leviathan or the Ascendant Arena. So those will obviously be the alluvials you catch in Overworld, and you can use those in the 1v1 mode. But those alluvials you catch in the Overworld will have a different cosmetic in the Gauntlet mode, this new mode we're talking about. So that was part of the concern, is that the alluvials you catch in the Overworld were meant to be used in the arena mode, and I guess people are worried that you'll lose some value of those NFTs if they're not needed for the arena mode. But personally, I think this Gauntlet mode will attract a far larger group of players that can potentially fall in love with the IP and jump into Overworld, catch alluvials, be introduced to the rest of the ecosystem. And everyone loves cosmetics. I mean, these free-to-play games, most of their revenue comes from cosmetics anyway. So for me, that's motivation enough to jump into Overworld, catch these alluvials. I mean, to me, Overworld is going to be popular just on its own without a ton of integration to other games, but obviously we'll have cosmetics in Gauntlet and using your alluvials directly in either Leviathan or Ascendant mode. So right here is just reiterating that they're still working on Ascendant mode. This isn't replacing it at all. It's just another game mode, and it's not going to take too much work because it'll take a bit of work, but it's not going to, they're still using the same mechanics. A lot of the work that's been put into Ascendant is obviously going to be used in Gauntlet. You're just throwing, instead of versing the same enemy each round, you're versing a new enemy each round. Obviously there'll be different mechanics with the rolling down and everything, but the mechanics of the alluvials are still the same. Here is just saying, yeah, there'll be a shop and there'll be a cost to refresh it. It's obviously, it gets refreshed each round for free, and then if you want to refresh it again to see if you can get some different alluvials, it'll cost. And it'll cost something like gold, and then gold, if you don't spend it, you'll get interest on that for the next round. So you've got to kind of decide, do I roll down now for a bit more power now, or do I remain weak and save my gold for interest, and then I'll have a lot more gold later. So a lot of people find this a lot more fun because it's more casual in that they can just queue up without the deck builder, without coming up with a team beforehand, and they can either be really competitive and optimize the economy, or just say, I'm going to play my favorite team, roll down. If I get lucky, I'll be able to finish top 4. If I get super lucky, I might be able to high roll, they call it, and finish top 1. So it's a lot more casual, a lot more addictive, and kind of more fun overall. And in my opinion, it's still just as competitive because there's way more decisions to be made because you're versing 8 people, and you got to worry about economy. Do I pivot? Do I stay? Do I spend resources to beat these certain players when I know that they might already be coming 8th or being beat by other players? You can't necessarily test every single deck and the outcome of every single matchup like you can in a 1v1 deck builder. But some people might argue that it's more competitive in the 1v1 because you can do that. And I guess it's the way I see it is more the 1v1's more closer to boxing, where it's more in the realms of knowing exactly what your opponent's going to do, whereas the 8-man gauntlet is closer to MMA, where you've got kicks and wrestling involved and the decision making is just way harder. But you could argue there's a little bit more RNG or luck involved, where because there's so many more options, there's more room to just for luck essentially. However, I see it as more competitive or harder and then therefore more competitive. Now, interestingly, what another difference between TFT is they're looking at having, or at least initially, having it so you can see who you're versing next round. In TFT, in most iterations of TFT, you haven't been able to see who you're versing next. Obviously, you play a different player each round, but it is somewhat random. So you're having an educated guess. But knowing exactly who you're going to verse next round allows you to position for them, and I think that's a better way to go. The other difference that there's going to be is with TFT, you can see your opponents moving in real time. So if you toggle to their board, you can kind of see what they place for the following round. With the way Ascendant Mode works, and likely Gauntlet's going to work, is you can still only see what they played last round. So you can't toggle to their board and kind of see where they moved last second and then toggle back to your board and reposition for that. You're just going to be able to see what they played last round, and you're going to have to guess what you think they might do for the following round, which I think is good, especially someone playing in the Oceania region. If I'm playing in different regions, my latency is always going to be less, so it's almost impossible for me to win those, toggling back to see if they've moved and then having time to toggle back to my board and repositioning, because players end up just moving at the last second. So with high latency and even higher actions per second, they're obviously going to have an advantage there. Most people don't play these games because they want to showcase their high actions per second. They'd probably be playing shooters or something else, or StarCraft or something like that. He also points out that this is obviously easier to implement because it's the way Ascendant Mode currently works. So they'll start with only being able to see your opponent's board based off the last round, which makes total sense rather than having to rebuild something that may actually be worse. I'm a fan of this overall. I think it's a far less risky move by Illuvium. It's already a proven concept. There's no need to try break the industry, reinvent the wheel when you have a proven game mode already in a niche genre. I think Illuvium has a lot of advantages over TFT and these other auto battlers that it doesn't need to really reinvent the game mode too much. And there's already going to be some key differences with the hyper. The artwork is just way better. Potentially the lore behind it, and I think it could just be a way cooler game. And without that barrier of any perception of pay to win or needing a deck builder, I think the player base is going to grow much bigger. And that's obviously going to bring people into the IP, bring people into Overworld. I think it's a very good move by Illuvium. Let me know what you think down below, whether you think it's a good move, bad move, what you would prefer, the Ascendant Mode or the Gauntlet. Are you happy with just the cosmetics? Personally, I am, but some people might want NFTs to be more valuable within every single game. And make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're yet to register for the private beta with the airdrop, the details of the airdrop are linked below, as well as a registration link that'll give you an extra chance to get into that private beta.